If you asked a random person on the street, what is it that you want most out of life? The majority of people would probably answer, I want to be happy. And yet, so many of us don't actually know what it takes in order to live a happy and fulfilled life. Well, fear not, because there are a lot of podcasts exactly on that topic. And in this video, I'm gonna share with you the top 5 podcasts about happiness. Check it out. The first podcast on our list is called 10% Happier, and it's hosted by a guy called Dan Harris. Dan Harris has an interesting biography. He used to work as a news anchor. He was highly competitive, highly successful, but ended up having a nervous breakdown on national television.
Now, one of the world's most commonly prescribed medications may be providing a big bonus. Researchers report people who take cholesterol-lowering drugs called statins for at least 5 years may also lower their risk for cancer. But it's too early to prescribe statins slowly for cancer production.
This incident made Dan Harris reconsider everything in his life, and it sent him on a quest to finding happiness and lasting satisfaction. He describes his quest in a book that he wrote called 10% Happier, which ended up becoming a national bestseller, and from that on he started making podcasts as well. So if you're interested in how to find peace of mind, how to relax, how to be less stressed, how to find your passion, follow your true calling, then this is definitely a podcast that you should check out. Podcast number 2 about happiness that you should definitely check out is called the Science of Happiness podcast. This podcast to me is so fascinating because it is completely scientific. So the topics might be called something like how to keep love alive, who makes you feel connected, or a better way to talk to yourself. But then all of these topics are discussed not with a pop science kind of attitude, but with actual factual science that has been researched for years and decades. And you can be sure that that is true because the podcast is actually co-produced by Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center. That is a specifically dedicated department at Berkeley where they do research on happiness, on positivity, on a happy and fulfilled life, and a lot of different components that play into that. So if you are interested in learning more about topics like mindfulness, gratitude, compassion, and you want to do so with a completely scientific background, then that is definitely the podcast for you. On top of that, the podcast episodes are rather short, so that makes it easy to listen to them, for example, on your commute to work, and they tend to get very practical. They like to give practical examples, so that makes it possible to take all that science and then apply it into your own life very easily. Podcast number 3 on our list of happiness podcasts is simply called Happier with Gretchen Rubin. Gretchen Rubin is an American author that became famous with her best-selling book called The Happiness Project. And after that book became so successful, she started to dive even deeper in the topic of what makes us actually happy. And she started making a podcast about that together with her sister. That podcast might be a little bit less scientific than the previous one, but it's actually a lot of fun to listen to it. Also because those sisters have a very unique and interesting dynamic when talking with each other. And Gretchen's sister is often used as a guinea pig to try out different techniques to increase your day-to-day happiness. I actually believe that what makes this podcast so outstanding is that those two are not scientists, that they don't always know the science behind what makes them feel good or bad, but they simply like to try things out. They like to experiment a little bit, and they only talk about their own experiences. They don't generalize, they don't tell you what you have to do or what will work for you. They simply share what works for them, and then it is up to you to try it out and decide for yourself if you like the results or you don't. I also really like that Gretchen Rubin never really aspired to become a self-help guru. She never aspired to make it big as a public speaker, as somebody who teaches other people how to live, but she simply is an author that stumbled on a topic that really interested her, happiness, and that wants to share her insights with a large audience. You can frequently find new episodes of Happier with Gretchen Rubin on all popular podcast platforms. The next podcast on our list is a little bit of the odd one out, you could say. It is Russell Brand with his new podcast called Under the Skin. Most of us know Russell Brand as this British comedian with the crazy hair, as an actor, as a womanizer, maybe as an author, or possibly as the ex-husband of Katy Perry. But what many people don't realize is that Russell Brand is also really spiritual and really interested in developing himself, growing himself further, and making sure that he lives a very happy and fulfilled life. And I believe that he had some exceptionally interesting guests on his podcast so far, guests that really can help you go deeper into the topic of happiness. Guests like Jordan Peterson, Brené Brown, or Sam Harris. What I also like about the way that Russell Brand interviews those partners is that it's a very open conversation. It's a back and forth dialogue, and you can tell that Russell Brand also thought a lot about all these topics. At the same time though, he's not overshadowing, he lets his guests speak, and he's always very interested in their take, in their point of view on things, even when they might disagree. If you know a little bit about Russell Brand, then you know that he had a rather rocky start into his career. He had issues with drugs and alcohol, and eventually had to let go of all these things that provided pleasure for him in order to find something more meaningful and more sustainable for his life that would still provide him the same kind of happiness. So I believe that he's at least a very qualified person to talk about happiness, joy and pleasure, and how to derive that from different sources that are available to us in our modern society. If you're interested in going very deep into spiritual topics, into philosophy with some of the brightest minds in our modern times, then definitely make sure to check out Russell Brand's Under the Skin. And number 5 on our list of the top happiness podcasts right now is the Positive Psychology Podcast. As the title already might suggest, this again is a podcast that is more scientific based. And it covers the most interesting and most up-to-date research in the field of positive psychology. But not only that, it also brings to you topics that you might not necessarily relate to happiness right away. So for example, how to optimize your sleeping schedule, how to deal with loss, or how to develop authentic leadership. A lot of the episodes are kind of narrated, but then on top of that, there are other episodes where pretty famous guests join the host and they discuss different aspects that play into happiness. Some of the more well-known ones would, for example, be the best-selling authors Ryan Holiday and Cal Newport. So if you're interested in cool advice on how to live your life a little bit happier each day, how to implement the most up-to-date scientific research in the field of positive psychology, and on top of that want to listen to fascinating guests that all have their unique perspective on how to live a good life, then this podcast is definitely the right choice for you. All in all, I believe that those 5 podcasts really cover the entire spectrum of what is out there in terms of happiness podcasts. I'm pretty sure that whatever kind of podcast listener you are, whether it is you really being interested in short format or long format, whether you like interviews more or somebody narrating scientific research to you, whatever it may be, you can find the right podcast amongst those 5. And if you have other podcast recommendations that you believe I should really be aware of when talking about happiness, then just make sure you leave a comment down below. Let other people know what your resources are for living a happy and fulfilled life. And if you're interested in watching more videos about happiness, then make sure you subscribe to this channel, because I'm regularly posting videos exactly about that topic. Until then, talk to you next time.